Welcome to The Green Rush, a podcast about the business of cannabis. On a weekly basis, hosts Ann Donahoe and Louis Goldberg talk with the CEOs, politicians, and cultural icons driving the cannabis industry forward. This week is one of those weeks where it's just one of our hosts, as Ann was off, leaving Louis to speak with a truly interesting guest, Matt Karnes from GreenWave Advisors. If you have an interest in investing in cannabis stocks, this one is well worth the listen, as Matt is one of the sharpest guys in the industry. If you're not familiar with this firm, GreenWave Advisors provides financial research and analysis of the American cannabis industry and has consistently generated accurate and relevant legal marijuana insight. They're the only independent firm to bring Wall Street investment research credentials to this emerging sector. So fire up your E-Trade account and get ready to take some notes. Don't sit back, lean forward. And now on to our interview with Matt Karnes.
Hey man, thanks for joining us today. It's just you and me. Anne would normally be doing this with me, but she's off doing who the heck knows what, but she just didn't have the time for you. So I'm familiar with GreenWave. Can you tell us all what you guys do?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. So GreenWave Advisors, I'm the founder. I'm based in New York City. We're based in New York City. GreenWave was founded about 4.5 years ago. To provide financial research and analysis for the emerging cannabis industry. By way of background, I worked on Wall Street as an equity analyst. I worked on the sell side at Bear Stearns, at Cowen, and which is now First Union, which is now Wells Fargo, mostly covering radio broadcasting and satellite communication stocks. And at Bear Stearns Consumer Internet. When I went to the buy side, I became more of a generalist, covered those sectors as well as several others. Prior to that, I began my career as a CPA. I came up the ranks in public accounting and then worked for a couple of multinational companies in various financial roles. So in 2010, I want to say 2009, 2010, our fund blew up as the whole world was turning upside down as a result of the financial meltdown. So at that point, my mother was also sick with cancer. After she passed, I just thought, well, gee, if she only had medical marijuana, it would have made her landing a lot more smoother because she opted not for chemo. And so after she passed, I was reading something about medical marijuana and thought, gee, if only mom had this, it would have made things a little bit easier for her towards the end of her life. I went up to Boston to what was my first pot conference, not knowing what to expect.
What year was this?
This was 2014. This was March of 2014.
Okay.
And I was pleasantly surprised, really not knowing what to expect. There was a couple of folks that sparked my interest. They appeared to be, just pretty much mainstream investor types. I went back. This was more of an operational type of conference gathering. I went back a couple of weeks later to another conference that was more focused on investors. And there was a little bit more Wall Street types in the crowd. And I thought, okay, well, if these guys are here, there must be something real about it. And interestingly, in that crowd was Brendan Kennedy. And in that crowd was Troy Dayton. So I really do feel...
Oh, I'm sorry. I know who they are, but who are Brendan Kennedy and who are Troy Dayton?
Well, Brendan Kennedy is the CEO of Tilray, which is one of the largest licensed producers in Canada. They just listed on the NASDAQ a couple months ago.
Yeah, we're going to talk a lot about them coming up.
Yep. And he's also the chairman, I believe that's his title, at Privateer Holdings. And then there's Troy Dayton, who is the CEO of the ArcView Group, the largest, angel network for the cannabis industry. So just meeting those two folks, those two guys, I sat well. My gut told me, okay, this is real. There were a few others along the way. And then I went that summer.
It seems like, by the way, it seems like everybody has that gestalt moment where like, oh, this is real. Like, this is not, not a bunch of guys sitting around getting stoned. It's real business.
Yes. Yep. It really is. And it was really hard for other people to understand that 4.5 years ago, because when I had those conversations, hey, Matt, what are you doing now? Hey, I'm thinking about doing something in marijuana. What are you, crazy? God, geez.
No, it's what are you high?
Yeah, like,
right?
like, what are you smoking, dude? That type of thing. So it really, I had to stick with my gut, because I was telling myself, these people didn't see the people I saw. They don't know. And also, just being a sell side analyst and a buy side analyst, I've seen other emerging industries, and you kind of see the same, the same sentiment, experience the same sentiment from all people early on, like, oh, this is never going to work. Oh, this is, the naysayers. But as you develop the skill and you see things and you've been around the world, you kind of realize that your intuition is probably your best guide as you move forward. And so,
well, and in this industry, it's different, right? I mean, there is a $60 to $100 billion market that already exists, and something like 10 billion of that is legal. So it's not like this industry is betting on a something to develop. It's betting on converting the illicit market into the licit market. So it's a fundamentally different thing than like the internet boom or the crypto bubble that we saw last year.
Absolutely. And this is something that touches people that, really, you could really, it's tangential. Or it's tangible, I should say. It's something that, most people, not necessarily the product that gets you high, but there's, other aspects of the cannabis plant that will benefit people in everyday life. People don't realize that, eating cereal or, some of these soft drinks that will likely have CBD in them and so forth. And I know we'll talk a little bit more about that. But to your point, yes, I mean, this is a proven market. We know that it is a plant that actually, has benefits in many different ways.
So, it is a proven market, but there's an expression of that market that's the stock market, right? And your background is the buy and sell side, and you understand how to analyze stocks as well, if not better than other people. So we're recording this on September 21st, and in my office I have CNBC on all day, and we have been representing cannabis companies for a very long time. And that network, as a network, has been really resistant to covering the industry. And it seems like this week they have gone all pot all the time. And I think a lot of that has been around Tilray's stock, right? You had mentioned them. They went nuts this week, right? They started out in the $100 range. They peaked at $300, and they're back in the below 150. And it's still, even at like $150, it's got a market cap of over $10 billion. All of these Canadian stocks seem to have crazy high valuations. Can you make an argument? I mean, either way, are they right priced? Are they overpriced? Like, how are you looking at these stocks?
Oh, they're clearly overpriced. There's no rationale. Nothing moves up like, 50%, 20%, 30% a day rationally. I think there's just a lot of excitement, a lot of enthusiasm of the recreational market coming to Canada October 17th. I think there are a lot of people out there. And this also, the mere fact that Tilray listed directly on the NASDAQ is very appealing. That will attract some level of institutional money. And, even just, average portfolio managers that want to trade for their own account, have a little bit more comfort level knowing that, these stocks are listed on a major U.S. exchange. But there is really no rationale. Technically a stock should trade on future value, the present value of, expected cash flows.
Right.
But, there's really no rhyme or reason. And one thing I noted was the day that the Tilray announced that they were going to export some cannabis into the U.S. for medical research, the stock just went straight up as a result of that announcement. And if you put that into perspective, I mean, the DEA has only authorized about 5,400 pounds. And they've opened the window. Besides the University of Mississippi, they opened the door for other applicants. There are about 25 other applicants. So we only know of Tilray that is accepted. Even if they had all 5,400 pounds, if you kind of convert that to a dollar amount, that's like at $1,500 a pound. There's no way that would justify the movement in the stock.
So this is irrational exuberance, right? This is the definition of a bubble.
Yep. And it's all news flow. And there's, a lot of reasons people are getting excited because of, all the other industries that are swarming around cannabis. And I'm sure, you'll have questions about Constellation Browns, but, there's a lot of companies on the sidelines vying for a spot in the world of cannabis. And that's also, propelling these valuations.
Yeah. I mean, I work with a lot of these companies, and some of these CEOs are like the best CEOs are the ones who don't pay attention to their share price day in and day out and really just run their business. But some of these guys who are seeing this crazy appreciation are walking with a swagger, and the other ones whose stocks are not going up as fast have this FOMO, this fear of missing out. I don't want to get into those guys. I have a different question for you, though. We're like I said, we're recording this at the end of September. A couple weeks from now, October 17th, is the day that Canada goes adult use across the country. Has this been priced in? Do you think that we're going to see another pop, or are people going to sell on the date? Like, what does this date mean?
Well, I think it's sort of just a milestone, and I don't think. In fact, I think there'll be more of a sell-off as we get near that date, because I don't think the recreational market will be all that significant in the first year and a half. In fact, it's likely to be very lackluster for a number of reasons, and so I do think that there'll be a sell-off. But I do think, headlines every day, it seems like there's another type of announcement, whether it's M&A, whether it's, somebody investing, some, strategic investor, a relationship, supply agreement, whatever it is, the news du jour is what's really moving these stocks.
So you advise institutions and individuals, in understanding how to look at the industry, right? And part of what you've done is taken a look at the uniquely strange relationship between the U.S. banking industry and the cannabis industry. Can you talk about some of the data that you discovered? I think it was late last year or early this year, and also put that into context with like the Constellation investment was managed by investment banks like Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan and Wells Fargo, but JP Morgan and Wells won't take deposits from cannabis companies. So can you talk about like this whole strange universe?
Yeah, so it's one of the bottlenecks and just one of the overhangs on the industry right now in the U.S. is the fact that because cannabis remains a Schedule 1, financial institutions generally will not accept deposits or do any banking business with any any business that is involved in the sector, or plant touching businesses, I should say, those that are directly involved with day-to-day operations. So basically, the federal government, then the FinCEN, the Financial Enforcement Crimes Division of the U.S. Treasury, they came in when under the Obama administration, when the Cole Memo was issued, which for your listeners who are not familiar with the Cole Memo, these were a set of guidelines that were issued by the Department of Justice under Obama, which basically said, the federal government will not interfere with the state's regulated cannabis markets so long as there are certain guidelines that are adhered to. And this is all spelled out in the Cole Memo, which, Jeff Sessions later rescinded.
Well, but there were also the FinCEN notes in the memo, right? I mean, that was as most important, or some people would say most important.
Exactly. So FinCEN said, okay, well, bank, we'll let you bank a cannabis business, but you have to make sure that your customer is in full compliance with the Cole Memo, which was what we just talked about. And, many banks, it instilled the fear of God in many of these banks because, how do they have the 100% assurance that their customers are in compliance. It would be a tremendous overhead burden, compliance burden, to ensure that these businesses are in full compliance. So many of these banks just say, you know what, we don't want to have anything to do with this, next. So, but many smaller institutions are willing to take that risk for a large fee, of course. And so that's why you have some banks that will accept deposits and many others that won't, particularly the larger institutions, because they have more, at risk.
Right. Totally. So, I think one of the other things that's really interesting about what's going on in the financial institution or the financial sector is that, there are dozens of companies out there that have recently raised or are raising significant private capital, right? Earlier this year, Acreage Holdings, full disclosure, a KCSA client, announced a $119 million private raise, which to everybody's knowledge is the largest private raise in the cannabis industry. This all came from either high net worth individuals or family offices. It did not really come from institutional investors. And institutional investors often are aggregate pools of investments from teachers' pensions or cop pensions or firefighter pensions. And I'm almost 50. I've been doing PR for 25 years. I've seen the tech bubble. I've seen other bubbles or new industries arise. All that was fueled by VC money or private equity money. And a lot of the benefit inured back to those teachers' pensions and the like. This industry is different, right? All the money is coming from high net worth individuals. So the people who already have the money are going to make the money when these companies all cash out. I mean, is this a unique structure? I mean, what would you say could be done to bring a little more equity on the investing side?
Well, unfortunately, yeah, it is precluding many of the larger institutions from coming in just because of the mere fact that it remains illegal. And the pension funds and so forth, they're not going to take the risk of investing in an activity that's illegal at the federal level. Right. But having said that, and yes, a vast majority of the money is coming from, just individuals. But bear in mind, there is a substantial amount also coming from venture capital firms and private equity firms and family offices because they don't have to, answer to, an investment committee in the same context as a pension.
And they don't have sin clauses in their offering, in their docs.
Yeah, exactly. So a good example is, Privateer Peter Thiel, who invested in Privateer, who's, Privateer's into Tilray. So that's really, a VC type of play into the industry. So, I mean, there are, a lot of success stories that have, starting to unfold right now. But I would say, it is unfortunate that there is a very limited amount of opportunities for the average investor. But having said
what before they go public, but once they go public, these equity markets are almost exclusively retail, right?
Yeah. I mean, you're going to see. I mean, I think that's a big reason why we saw such a run up in Tilray. It has a very small float, and you had a lot of excitement among retail investors.
Hold on. Not everybody knows what a float is, so can you just literally take one quick second to explain what that means?
Oh, okay. So basically, a float is the amount of shares that are outstanding that are tradable. So say, for example, a company issues 100 shares. There may only issue 20 of those shares may be available for the public.
And with Tilray, it's something like 15%, right?
It was like 15, I think it was 20% actually. But, still, it's very small relative to the amount of shares that are outstanding. So the majority of the shares and the ownership is with Tilray.
Right.
Tilray. I'm sorry, with Privateer.
And they are going to potentially put a bunch of those shares into the market in after the lockup period is over, right?
That's correct. So, yeah, exactly. So we could see pressure on the shares at that point. That could be a good entry point, but who knows where the stocks will be then. But certainly it seems to me that, the stocks are starting to slowly come back down to earth,
Some of them. I mean, you look at companies like Green Thumb, or you look at companies even like MedMen. They've seen a significant increase, and Canopy Growth has seen a significant increase. Aurora has gone up a lot over the last couple of months, and not more disclosure. Aurora is a client of ours. Speaking of Aurora, this year was the beginning of what could be a massive M&A boom. You know, Aurora's purchase of MedRelief was a multi-billion-dollar M&A. What do you think is going to happen over the next couple of months? Is this year, 2018, going to see a massive amount of M&A in the last couple of months, or are we going to see just what's 2019 look like?
Well, I do think we're going to see a continued streak of M&A activity in many different areas, and certainly into 2019, particularly as we see how the recreational market unfolds in Canada. So I think there's going to be a lot more dialogue and a lot more strategy. And I think, in my opinion, I think this is a catalyst for an accelerated timeline in the U.S. to fully legalize.
So Bruce Linton, the CEO of Canopy Growth, just got, or not just, but about a month or so ago, got a massive infusion of capital, a huge investment from Constellation of over $4 billion. I mean, he is King Midas sitting on a mountain of cash. Where do you think he's going to deploy it?
That's a good question. I mean, certainly the company, it's too early to, pay a dividend. But not yet.
Yeah, no dividends there's no earnings. So
yeah, right. So we're not there yet. But I would say there's a multitude of opportunities and different types of scenarios. Perhaps I do believe there'll be a lot of consolidation with the LPs, because if you think about it, there's about over 100 licensed producers right now in Canada. Not all these operations are scalable. So perhaps he picks some of the better ones and just, sweeps them up. That's one possibility. Perhaps, some of that capital is deployed into, an acquisition of some other brand. I mean, they have a nice catalog of product offerings, but, there's always something else out there.
If you look at the U.S. market, right, and the aggregate of all of the plant-touching companies, he could buy the entire United States, all of the public companies in America, and still have like $2 billion left over. Do you think he's trying to figure out how to spend down south of the border, or is he really only going to look north?
I would think he's probably looking everywhere. So I don't believe he would discount, but I think that there are restrictions, if I'm not mistaken, on a Canadian company investing directly in a U.S. company. Am I right on that?
You're right. No, you're right on that. But there's always look. I hate to say it, but when it comes to Wall Street, there was never a rule that wasn't meant to be either broken or at least bent, right? So yep. There may be restrictions on the money now, but if Goldman advised on the deal, I'm sure that they've got some Goldman guys who are looking at every rule going, I wonder if we can do this, or I wonder if we can do that.
Of course. And granted, they were on the other side of that transaction because they were on the Constellation brand side.
Yeah.
But still, come on, you got to believe that all these guys are sitting down and strategizing. No doubt about it. They're ready to move. They're ready to rock and roll for sure.
Oh yeah. And the banks are all, especially the Canadian banks, like Canaccord and GMP and others, have a ton of U.S. companies that are in queue to list on the Canadian Stock Exchange, right? And they're tapping into all this institutional money, mostly in Canada and then some in Europe. Do you think that there's a growing investor fatigue that's developing? Like people are saying, I've eaten all the cannabis companies I can, I'm full. Or do you think there's still an insatiable appetite for the new issuers?
I think it's going to be increasingly more difficult to get these deals done. But having said that, I think the better players won't have a problem. I think Acreage is a home run, personally. I think, there's a few, perhaps others as well. But, it seems like in vogue now, let's just go to Canada and list and, cash out. But no, I don't think so. I think there is an element of fatigue. But, cream always rises to the top. and I think the better players will still succeed in that effort.
I think that that there can only be so much institutional money in Canada, right? Like there's like 37, 38 million people there. There's fewer people in Canada than California, but I know these guys are marketing deals all over the world, and if they go to Germany or they go to Sweden or Switzerland, there's got to be. I mean, they're looking at this going, holy shit, this is a huge market. My gut says that there will be, for the next 5, 6, 7 months, anybody who goes public should have the ability to make their deal done. It may take them longer, but I don't think anybody's going to be like, I wanted to raise 50 and I only raised 25. I don't think any of those. I don't think that's going to happen. Not that I know, but that's you can bet on whatever I say, and lose.
Yeah. There's so much going on, and that's very likely. And conversely, I've heard that there have been a couple companies that have tried, and they've been a little bit more stringent on getting through.
Mm-hmm.
So some companies have backed off, but that could just be a function of the company, not necessarily, of the demand for, better companies. So it's hard to say.
I think you're right. I think it's the good company. You said it. The cream will rise,
yep.
And it will get skimmed off, right? And and we can then switch to a different plant or a different thing and say the chaff will fall. So, and sticking with the farm theme, let's gather wool for a second, shall we? Hey, look, if I don't make at least one really bad cheesy dad joke in episode, people will get pissed.
Okay, wait. And I have a couple up my sleeve too. So if you get,
bring
if you
them.
run out, look, sure.
You can tap out. You can tap in anytime. Bad jokes are fine.
Well, we didn't talk about joint ventures.
Okay, we'll get there. So look, I've said for the last couple months that I actually think that there's a good chance that in October Donald Trump will reschedule the cannabis. He'll take it from Schedule 1 to Schedule 2 or Schedule 3 and be able to turn around and look in the camera and say, see, the Republicans legalized weed, and it will drive everybody nuts, right? And it's because it polls so high. It's like the only thing that every American agrees on, that legal cannabis in some form, or cannabis should be legal in some form or another. What do you think would happen if he reschedules before the November elections?
Well, first of all, a couple things. Number one, there is something coming down the pike very soon from the DEA with regards to Epidiolex. Epidiolex is the drug that was recently approved by the FDA that is manufactured by GW Pharma. This drug is derived directly from the cannabis plant. It's not synthetically created. So because the FDA approved this drug, it removes the argument or it distorts the argument that Schedule 1 drugs have no medicinal benefit. This drug is used to help children to eliminate or to reduce the number of seizures experienced by children with epilepsy. Yep. So now we agree, okay, well, you know what? This does have medicinal benefits. So now we cannot call this a Schedule 1. So the question becomes, what happens? I believe it's September 25th because it was June 25th.
90 days. Yep.
Yeah, so we're really coming on that date. And
which, by the way, you have now completely revealed my Wizard of Oz thinking, right? Because I saw the 90 days and I said he's going to use this to his advantage. So you outed me.
You think you mean Trump using it to his advantage?
Yes, 100%. That he's going to be forced to do it by the FDA. So then he's going to turn around and say, "I did this." That's what I was actually thinking.
Just thinking. Well, they might just say, okay, Epidiolex is a Schedule 3 or whatever they determine. Like they might just leave everything else alone for now. And which I think might just be what happens right now. But I do think the Canadian market will accelerate the timeline for the Trump administration, not to necessarily reschedule, because it's not really going to be beneficial to the rec market if it's rescheduled. We really need to have it, just delisted. And I say why I think it's likely, because if you think about it, we have U.S. multinational companies stepping in now, or there's the perception or the speculation that the Coca-Colas of the world are vying for an investment opportunity to put CBDs in their beverages, and they need to get that from Canada. And there's, tons of other opportunities, soft drink companies in the U.S., other multinational companies, not just in soft beverage, but whatever else, where CBDs will be a welcomed additive. And why should we sit back? Why should America sit back and watch Canada reap the benefits? Why should the Canadians get the U.S. multinational companies' investment dollars? I think it's wrong. I think we should just, make it legal here and let us lead in this category.
I mean, we lead in consumption, we lead in production, we should lead in that as well, right?
Yep, absolutely.
So let's stick with politics for a minute. It looks like the polling in Michigan, where there is it's on the ballot for adult use. It's something like 60% right now favor it. So it looks like it's going to pass. Everything that we're hearing out of New Jersey is that there will be legislation literally going through the House and the Senate in New Jersey, and Phil Murphy, the governor, has said he will sign legislation. And if that happens, that Andrew Cuomo is going to do it like right away. So it all looks like, to me, it looks like this is like a done deal. But when do you think it's going to be legal in some form or another in all 50 states?
Oh, so basically how we determine our market size, we do believe that over the next 3 to 4 years, or 3.5 to 5 years, every state will be fully legal, will be either medical only or fully legal. But every state will have at least a medical program, and I really do not think that's unrealistic, given that right as we sit today, we're at 30 states. We have Utah coming on board, and there's a lot of dialogue in the remaining states. It's not like a dead issue.
Texas has like this tiny little program. Can you imagine how much bigger is the market going to be when Texas is legal?
Several $1 billion. I don't have my model right in front of me right now, but I could tell you, and I do have that factored in, and which is why my GreenWave estimates are higher than the streets, no pun intended, because how to put that, because we factor in anticipation of states ramping up. And so we did that way back when we launched in 2014. We anticipated California, so our estimates were higher then. California hit, and now we're moving in that trajectory where other states are coming online. And we have, New York and Michigan. We're very optimistic that all these other state ballot initiatives will prove out. And if we're wrong on one or two states, I don't think it's going to materially change our numbers. But we're really taking the ball to the end of prohibition, and when prohibition ends, then when everything's full bloom, it's much, much more significant.
So how big do you think that market is when it is a fully mature cannabis market where you've got everything from edibles to like literally everything? How big is the market in the U.S.? And
like I would say, and if you include CBDs, so this is the thing, right? So like if you look at just like cannabis type of products just for recreational use, that's probably, I would say it's got to be at least $75 to $100 billion. Because I do think the medical market, and this is part of our thesis, is that medical marijuana as it exists today will be recalibrated and redefined, and medical marijuana will be what's available at a pharmacy, just like Epidiolex and things that are proven. And every state is merging their medical and rec market because it's, for all intent and purposes, in many cases, the same product. And it's not cost effective from the state standpoint to regulate two separate markets. Why do you need to have two protocols and two, oversights for basically the same thing? So just put it under one regime. And if you have a medical card, you get some kind of a discount and so forth.
I think you may be actually underestimating it, because if it gets where there's insurance reimbursement for it, right? And it is used for anxiety and pain, and like think about how big is the market for over-the-counter non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, right? How big is the market for Valium and any of the other anti-anxiety medications? I mean, those have to be $5 billion markets in each, if not more. So you may be underestimating the size of the market.
Well, I think in those cases, those like the anti-anxiety medications, like those, most of those are prescription medications. So that's what I'm talking about, like how you would define like a rec market.
Okay, I'm
without even
sorry.
really giving consideration. And I do think like in terms of like insurance, I think the insurance companies are going to be very stringent, or they're going to really, be more defined on and how or what they will allow as the definition of chronic pain, because I could see what could happen. Everybody's going to say they have a backache. Let me get some pot, and there we go. I mean, how could the insurance companies afford that? So I think there's going to be a lot of discussion about that and what is allowed and what isn't allowed. Personally, I think what they would allow is what is true medical marijuana, and not something that's a pseudo recreational drug.
And it probably won't be in a flower form. I mean, it'll be in an oil or a pill or something else. So it'll be in the form factors that they are used to approving.
Yes, I would agree with that. And we really don't know at this point. The other part of there's a lot of still unknowns in this industry. I mean, we could kind of figure it out. I mean, take educated guesses on how this will all play out. But at the end of the day, we're still at the very early inning. The other thing are what people categorize as cannabis.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
I think you're a cannaceutical product.
Oh, yes.
So basically, that would be, a product that you would get at the drugstore, over the counter. But then that begs the question, are these products already existing, and then all you're doing is putting some CBDs in them? So do you consider that like, an additional market? So, for example, even like with the soft beverage or the beverage companies, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, and so forth. Okay, say that's $100 billion market. And now we put CBDs in that. Is that now, do you add that to the whole CBD market? I don't know. You're kind of double counting there in terms of an industry sizing.
All right, so I got to ask a completely different question.
Okay.
Have you ever had more fun in your career than you're having now?
No, but I've made a hell of a lot more money. But no, I really do enjoy what I'm doing, and it's really interesting for me because one thing I didn't mention early on is besides the research and the analysis, part of the other service offering that GreenWave provides is providing due diligence, consulting services, valuation. We're involved in a lot of different things. But I think most important for what I'm doing now is my auditing background, because numbers are thrown all over the place. There's different data points. You really need human intelligence to kind of try and figure it out, what makes sense. And really, I think it's very helpful to investors to know that whatever they're investing in, somebody has kind of read between the lines and asked the probing questions. And anybody contemplating any type of investment, I think, should really make sure that they have, the right due diligence team in place, because there certainly are a lot of snakes in the grass.
Okay, so we are at the point in the show where we do puff, puff, pass, where I'd like you to just name really quickly the two things that you're really like loving about the industry and the one thing that kind of drives you nuts.
Sure. I think, what I really, really, really love about the industry right now, and I have, really from day one, is the level of energy and enthusiasm, and even more now, the level of creativity and ingenuity, because we're getting a lot more mainstream type of professionals stepping in that are, bringing in ideas and in that creative thought process from other industries into cannabis. So it's very exciting now. I would also say what I really do enjoy about this industry and what I really applaud the industry for, it's very inclusive. It does not discriminate, as far as I could see. The doors are open to everybody. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter anything, because there's a big need for professionals. So those are two things that I think are very appealing to me right now. And I think, on the downside, what I would say, which I think is going to, kind of resolve itself, it's starting to already. But, understandably, there are a lot of charlatans that still remain in the industry. But, it's just a matter of time before they're weeded out. Again, yep. No pun, but,
All right. Well, hey, man, I really enjoyed getting to chat with you. I think what you guys are doing at GreenWave is awesome. I would highly recommend anybody to follow Matt. And I'll, when I do the outro, I'll give all of your contact information. But what you are doing with GreenWave Advisors is really cool, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me.
Oh, my pleasure. And you guys are doing a great job yourselves. And I look forward to speaking again.
Awesome. Thanks again to our guest, Matt Karnes, who is the founder and managing partner of GreenWave Advisors. Follow the good work that he's doing. You can go on his website, which is greenwaveadvisors.com. That's all one word. Or you can follow him on Twitter, which is at GreenWaveMJ. He can also be found on LinkedIn at GreenWave-Advisors. Next week, we'll be at the Cannabis World Congress and Business Expo in LA. And next week is September 27th. I will be hosting a panel actually talking about the intersection of cannabis and the capital markets with some of our past guests, including William Simpson, the CEO of Golden Leaf, MPX's Beth Stavola, Forefront's Chris Crane, and MTech's Tahira Ramatula. I think this is going to be really cool. We're going to actually tape the panel conversation and turn it into a special episode that we will be publishing in the next couple of weeks. Should make for a really interesting conversation. And I just, I know we say this every week, but we can't say it enough. Thank you for listening. When we started this podcast, we never assumed that we would get a really big following. And, there are now a lot of people who are paying attention to us and, more importantly, to our guests. So if you have the option and you can, that little subscribe button there, please do that. And give us a rating and review on iTunes or on Stitcher or wherever you're listening to it. And if you have a question or a comment, Ann and I would love to hear from you. So you can either check us out on Twitter and Instagram at KCSA_cannabis, or you can shoot us an email at greenrush@kcsa.com. That's one take, Shay. One take.